Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. It is Saturday. It is January 18th. And we actually have a number of new watch releases to talk about. I actually started my planning for the week thinking we were only going to discuss two, and then it became three. And then this morning, I threw in a new colorway for the Tudor Black Bay Chrono. So we're going to actually cover four in varying degrees because of some pre-recorded stuff that I did during the week, which I will get into. But for the moment now, in terms of wristwatch check, today is, I can't ever remember the number of this. This is one of the Citizen. I'll just hold it up to the camera. This is one of the Citizen line. This was their one that they did. They may have more than one at this point with the platinum flakes in it. So it's a high accuracy quartz watch. There was a good focus for a brief second. And so I often like to wear this one to work, but it had been a couple weeks since I put it on. So I went ahead and wore it today. It has nothing to do with any of the watches we're going to be talking about today. But in fact, I don't own any of the brands that are up for today's discussion. So I've owned some of them before, but nothing currently in the lineup. So we will go ahead and get into that. But in terms of pre-recorded, so housekeeping catch-up stuff, I did have one main pre-recorded video over the last week. I'll drop a link to it in the chat. It is regarding my first reactions to the Vacheron Constantin 222 in steel. Obviously, that was one of the early in the week announcements that got a lot of discussion by people. Obviously, the 222 is a very iconic watch line. Was maybe 3 years ago where they launched the all gold version, which I still prefer, and we will get into that because I do want to spend a little bit of time sort of digesting what's happened with the new steel version. But this has been long anticipated. It was one of my 2025 predictions. I hadn't heard anything early, but honestly, it was such a safe pick. Not to mention, this is like the 275th, and I don't know. It's some anniversary. It's some anniversary. There's always an anniversary. There's some anniversary of Vacheron, I think, going on right now. But anyway, regardless, we will go ahead and we will dive into all of that. Let me get caught up with the chat first, though, before we get going. So those of you watching live, I appreciate it. And if you enjoy the video, do go ahead and click like. It helps other people find the channel. Brent, thank you for being a 99-cent club member, and good morning to you. I hope things are going well. Kevin, good morning. Welcome to the live stream. Matthew, also a 99-cent club member. Good morning to you. And Koji, also a club member, asking a question to get us started with. I think you hit the price of the Steel 222 pretty closely from the last live stream, question mark. Yeah, I guess so. When Tony and I were talking, I mentioned something, and I think I put it at around 30,000. I think it ended up coming in at 33,000. So yeah, I guess I mean I was within 10 grand. What's 10 grand among friends, right? That's the sort of thing. So and I had based that though on basically it's 32,000. I'm looking at a Hodinkee. I'll share it here in a moment because I do have a link to it in the chat, or excuse me, in the video description. But the logic behind that was the premium level that we've seen with the gold 222. Kind of, if you look at it vis-a-vis some of the all gold overseas, it's priced higher, even though its specifications aren't as impressive. So that was part of it. It also fits very closely with kind of what we've seen with its positioning versus Rolex, which it's a weird one to compare to because I don't think we would assume that Vacheron's comparing to Rolex, and they might not be directly, but everyone kind of falls into their little niche in this hobby. And so given that you have at the time when last year, before the new price increases, the day date, 36 millimeter day dates, the most basic ones, they were about 36,500. They're closer to 39,000 something right now. But you double that and you get very close to the $76,000 that the all gold 222 is. So you take one of the steel professional Rolex models, something along the lines of a Rolex Daytona. We'll just do a Daytona. That's around 15,000, 16,000. Double it. There you go. There's the 222 in steel. So you see where it kind of lives in the space. Not to mention, though, that if it's the integrated sports watch of the Holy Trinity, it's honestly easier to just say, well, what was the Nautilus 5711 in steel priced at? What's the 36 millimeter? Because this is a 37. What's the 36 millimeter priced Royal Oaks? It's in that neighborhood. So that's not where I think they kind of went from. And Underachieving Watch Collector, thank you for being a club member, and happy Saturday to you as well. All right, let me go ahead and put this up. I just want to show an image. I don't want to do a full thing about the Vacheron 222 because I linked it in the live chat, but I already have a video out. I did a first thoughts video. I hadn't done one. I'm not. My face doesn't even appear in it. I actually was getting ready for work, saw it came out, said I want to talk about this watch because the 222 is one of my most favorite designs. And so I just plugged in the microphone, recorded it, and then when I got home from work, I did my editing and got it released. So that's why I did it that way. And historically, I used to never do video for the, obviously it's a video, but I never video myself for a first thoughts video because usually people just want to look at the watches anyway. But that's rambling. There's been, of course, a ton of coverage. There was coverage. People had gotten hands on that day. So they had already clearly reached out, probably under embargo scenarios, with a variety of people to get hands on. A lot of the watch journalism sites were able to handle the watch. And if they didn't, they've handled it now. So here we are with the Vacheron 222. Specification wise, it's essentially identical to the gold version, except it's now in steel. There are some gold elements. Again, much like Rolex, we've got gold hands. I believe the indices are gold. You have the gold Maltese cross. You have gold rotor. So you can kind of see the two here side by side, just so you get a sense of it. Blue dial, matte dial in this instance versus the radiant blue. That's very popular. I think the most popular of the standard time plus date VC overseas models. So reaction depends. Like my reaction was very positive, but I do prefer the way the gold one looks. I've actually seen a lot more people than I thought agree with me that they like the look of this gold version. Part of that might just be that the gold is the way with the vintage vibe that it just adheres to, that it just sort of feel like it sort of embraces that late 70s design that it has going on for it. I also think that it plays up, if you weren't even really familiar with the 222, almost everyone's seen a Rolex day date before. It reminds me of the champagne day dates. There's still a champagne day date, but like the date and day discs are white now, but they used to be champagne colored and color matched to the dial. I don't know why Rolex doesn't color match them anymore. I just assume laziness, quite frankly. But this is color matched. And so on the gold one, on the blue one, it's not. And this is something that Vacheron, Patek as well. I think Audemars Piguet is the only one that's regularly doing color match date windows. So Patek and Vacheron love to use white date discs, I suppose, because it's easy to read. Whatever. It looks fine. I'm a big fan of radial and sun brushing. I've mentioned that before for people who've watched the channel for a while. So this matte blue in and of itself isn't my favorite blue. I've seen a lot of people, again, talking about reactions to these watches, say that they like the blue overseas better than the blue 222, mostly because of the dial. And I can completely understand that. I do think that the radial blue bright dial of the overseas would not look that good on this watch. But I could see where if you were picking between the two watches, you would pick that one. Also, if price mattered to you, you would pick that one because it's thousands of dollars less to buy an overseas than it is to buy a 222. The 222s are also boutique walled. It's like my version of paywall. You put stuff in the boutique and it limits watch flow. That worked very well for the gold version. And so I think Vacheron is doing a really smart play here. There's a video that I saw this morning, may have come out before today, but there's a video over on My Watch Journey where he does a breakdown of market analysis in terms of how he thinks this watch will perform. And so I would recommend going and seeing that video if you want to see, because he actually analyzes like dial color and watch size and how those trend in the market. But one of the key things, long story short, that he'll highlight is this hits a lot of sweet spots. Like Vacheron really picked very carefully, based off of his review, and I agree with him, when to launch this watch and how to launch the watch. The size was already predetermined, but going with blue was a very smart move. Doing it after a few years of the gold one. The gold one's finally, especially over the last year or so, dipped below its retail price, but it used to be up around $100,000. And it's not their goal to make them appreciate. But now that the gold one's slipping, there's probably a good sense that this blue one is not going to cannibalize new in-box sales of the gold one, because people are now readily finding, like, I have like 5 of the gold ones bookmarked on Chrono 24 right now, and I think 3 of them are under $70,000. So it's just one of those particular things. So anyway, overall reaction has been pretty negative to the price, especially given, well, one, we knew, at least I knew anything expensive is going to have that sort of reaction in general. But even people that play in this price bracket are annoyed that the steel one is so much more than a steel overseas. So that's a point of frustration. Of course, there are a lot of PRX homage references. So if you enjoy that, if you hate expensive watches, that's a great one you can ride on and stick it to. And again, the PRX there, I mean, I see the similarities. It could be, you could say, why wouldn't I just get that instead? The other thing, in addition to the price, that a lot of people are frustrated with is spec wise. This is very much a lesser watch compared to the overseas, but people are not buying this watch because of the specifications. Or they were thinking about it. They definitely aren't now. So those are just some final sort of highlights I'd touch on. But I have my whole first thoughts. Maybe you want to see all the analysis of like what all the watch has, what its size is, what its movement is, all that sort of stuff. So a few other chats before we move on to our first new watch that I haven't already covered of the day. Irvin, welcome to the live stream. Good to see you here. Joel Bolt, good morning to you. And Michael, stunning, out of my price range. Yeah, very, very expensive. Long term, I don't know what your price range is. Long term, I would assume that because these are not limited, that the steel ones will trade for less than they do retail. But if it's anything like the overseas, it's not going to, like, we're not talking like getting down under 10 grand or anything. So now some overseas do if you go back to the first gen, but so, who knows, time overall. The thing is, if you want to steal vintage 222, they're all more than the new one. So you don't have a vintage option that's affordable that can compete with it. So that's where they've got. Whereas if you want a gold 222, you can find plenty of. They made so many different sizes and stuff. Like they're 33 millimeter ones that trade around $40,000 to $45,000, I'd say. So you're talking, a good 40% reduction. And you have, if you like vintage, you have a vintage one to go with. But you have to accept the smaller sizing, which a lot of people, a lot of men won't accept. So speaking of sizing, if you like larger watches, well, Tudor's got your back. This is the one I added this morning. I wasn't going to talk about this watch, and I saw it pop up, and it's Tudor, and everyone always wants to talk about Tudor. So let's talk a little bit about Tudor. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this one either, however, because specification-wise, there is nothing new going on with this watch. It is simply a new dial color. This is a blog to watch. I do have a link to the video, in the video description to the article if you want to actually read it. But Tudor calls this flamingo-blue, which is one of the lamest names that tells me nothing that I can possibly think of. The article actually notes that Tudor pointed out this thing in their press release about that they know that flamingos aren't blue, but they think if you were to describe flamingo blue, then people would come up with this tone of turquoise. But why not just call it turquoise? We all know what this really is. This is Tiffany blue. And it looks good. Don't get me wrong. I've never been enamored with Tiffany blue. It's too bright for I would rather have a radial brush, deeper blue, than something this light. This is like an Easter egg to me. So Tiffany blue reminds me of Easter. And, between that shade of blue and that shade of pink, which is what they're getting at, is if you think of a blue version of flamingo, you would think of this shade. Sure, fine, fair enough. But it's still a weird comparison. I guess maybe they just wanted to put this backdrop as feathers. Maybe they really just had all these feathers lying around from Mardi Gras or something. And they were like, we need to use up these feathers. And so that's what they did. I don't know. That's the most logical thing I can think of. But anyway, I would take pink over this blue. The pink would be more wearable in my opinion. But for me, I'm sure it will appeal to a lot of folks. It's reasonably attractive. I think it looks fine with the black bezel and the white markers for everything else, because you've got the black subdials. I think they've tied it all in really well. Again, no color match date window, but the white disc is going to align really well with the blue, against the blue backdrop, but with all of the white indices all around it. So you still have that proportional color balance going on. This is not a thin watch, as you would expect. Chronographs generally are not. It does offer 200 meters of water resistance. The watch is about 14.5 millimeters thick. So, which we're going to touch on because there are plenty of kind of chronograph options that are going to be thinner for you. It's actually pretty wearable in terms of wrist distance or lug to lug. I think it's sub 50 millimeters. I'm looking right now because the blog to watch can never. The one thing I dislike about their site is they never group all of the watch specifications on these first reveals together in a box. So I always have to read it. 41 millimeters is the size of the watch itself. And do they actually have the lug to lug on here? I thought I read it. So I read more than one thing. So I can't remember anymore. I want to think it was about 48 millimeters lug to lug. But anyway, it's $5,800 or $5,875. I'm sure it'll do fine. I'm sure initially it'll be a little bit challenging to get because some people just scoop up everything that Tudor does. I had never been a fan of Black Bay Chrono. I don't want to be overly redundant, but it's a new video and people might be tuning in. So why do I not care for the Black Bay Chrono? Mainly, I don't like the snowflake hand because the hour hand, and since it's the hour hand, it has large portions of time where it disrupts the ability to read the subdials. I just think it's too big of an hour hand for a watch of this design. And otherwise, I don't oppose the snowflake hand. I had a Tudor with a snowflake hand. I liked it just fine. I don't love the snowflake hand, but I don't dislike it. But I dislike it with chronographs. I just think it's a little too. We had to stick with the Black Bay. We have to stick with the snowflake rather than truly embracing the functionality of a chronograph. I've heard very good things about the Breitling movement that they use in this watch. I've not personally manipulated the chronograph on this or the Breitling for that matter. And Tudor refines, they tune these movements, like they do some stuff to them. So it's not just straight up the same experience as using a Breitling chronograph. But 200 meters water resistance is pretty impressive if you care about that stuff. I know some people don't like screw down pushers, so just be aware of the design. You can see it here in the photo. So overall, I think it'll do all right. I think it was about a year ago where we saw the pink one come out. So I guess we'll expect the rest of Easter over the next few years. My next guess will be we'll have a flamingo green dial. And if you don't know what flamingo green is, just imagine what green would be if it was a flamingo. And just imagine what color the feathers would be that Tudor must have in the back room that they want to use for the photo shoot. But anyway, I just want to go ahead and throw that one out. I don't think that's a particularly interesting release, but blue will probably, generally I would say blue would do better than pink for obvious reasons. It's one of the most popular watch colors, period. I don't know about a shade like that, though. And the pink one still is somewhat hard to get, I think, used. So and I don't know why that has been as popular as it is either, other than, I mean, it's an attractive watch, but I don't think it's setting the world on fire. I can't help but think that Blue Flamingo is still an attempt about 2 years too late to exploit the whole Tiffany Nautilus. Everyone was coming out with turquoise dials. And I think that was a fad, and that fad has gone away except for the Nautilus. And that's not because people like the way it looks. But anyway, that's my take on that. Joe Bolt says, I like the color of the Tudor, but not enough to pursue it. Koji says, he's quoting, inspired by the long-legged sycamores of yore amongst the palm trees, their delicate pink, turquoise feathers ruffling in the Miami air. Does Miami get much wind? Probably. At least when the hurricanes come, they must get a lot. Sorry, apologies to all in Miami. I know Kevin's out in Lakeland, but I don't know where that is vis-a-vis Miami. Under Chidi says, I'll bet Dennis is hoping for the flamingo gray dial. You know, if I'm not gonna, I can't lie and say no. I'd still be mad about the name because I have to be consistent. But what would a gray flamingo look like? I think we could just take a flamingo and look at a black and white, put it through the grayscale in Photoshop, and that's what it'll look like. And I would probably like it, yes, because I am very, very, very boring when it comes to my watches. Speaking of boring watches, let's talk about Oris. The big anniversary at the end of the Divers 65. I guess there was a press release about that. I don't know. I didn't read the press release about that, but I've seen people ask me about this watch. I've seen this watch coming up. A lot of people are really, really excited about this watch. I don't really like it, but hey, this isn't all about me. It's about all of you. And it's an interesting watch, and that's why I think people are excited about it. But I've seen this watch before, and that's probably part of the reason I'm not all that super enthused. But nonetheless, I think it's very worthy of discussing. This article is with Worn and Wound. Again, link is down in the video description. So here's a better close-up of it. And of course, the thing that's going to draw everyone's eye is this very old-fashioned 3, 6, 9, and 12 hour markers with very stylized design, true to the original that they're basing this off of. There was a watch that came out in 2015 that was also an anniversary celebration of the Divers 65. And so that's what it reminds me of a lot, because so I've seen these numerals before. Zodiac actually had a line. I don't know, they still do. They had a line of watches that kind of had reminded me of this font a little bit, just a little bit, which I liked a bit better than this. This is, again, as much as I enjoy a good, boring black dial, this the numeral design is not something I would buy. So I'm not into this style of numerals, but it definitely feels like no other watch brand. The closest I could come up with was that weird example from Zodiac, which I can't even remember the name of the watches, that they were quartz watches the last I had looked, that had that sort of feature. So anyway, this, again, much like the Steel 222, this is not setting the world on fire in terms of specifications. This is a 38 millimeter watch. It's, I believe, only got 100 meters of water resistance. A lot of that Divers line, the modern ones, are at 200 meters, I believe, at this point. The 38 millimeters is bigger than the original, which, of course, I'm sure is shocking no one at 36 millimeters, because this is again, it's been around for decades and decades and decades as a design choice. They are using a third-party movement that's modified, so it's got a Solida-driven movement, so that's not going to set the world on fire either. And overall, it's really just a question if you like the look. Now, the watch does actually come in cheaper than most of the current edition stuff at about $2,500 US. So again, it's a vintage vibe thing that they're going with. I think it's a reasonably attractive watch on a lot of fronts. They got the rivet look, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it doesn't really bother me. You do have some micro adjust on the clasp, so you have some tooled micro adjust, not toolless, but it's really all about the dial. Versus the old one, this one's got the modernized jewels because it's a different movement than what was used back in the day for obvious reasons. I think the lume, the kind of Fotina they went with, again, they're trying to make it look like the old one. I think they've achieved that very well. It's an attractive looking watch if you like the dial aesthetic. I personally do not, but if you like vintage watches, this one might have already been on your radar as a design, just having seen it in the past. You might have looked at the 2015 version, which I think looks pretty close to this. So that's an option as well. But nonetheless, we talked about Oris recently, or I did on a live stream, and I mentioned where I feel that they're struggling in terms of positioning. These watches where they use the third-party movements are pretty reasonably priced. And so when you're coming in, midway between $2,000 and $3,000, I think you put a lot of people in play that are basically ruling out Oris on anything that's using their caliber 400 movement, because the price jumps always like over $1,000 just to get the in-house movement. And so I'm glad that they continue to do a lot with third-party movements, because I think you get a lot of interesting and attractive design choices. And while this one's not my particular favorite, I do like a lot of the Oris design language. And if you're not all about specification, this one might be right up there. I'd say almost right up there with the the SRP K17 from Seiko, that vintage. Like when that came back out, there was a lot of buzz about it. I have seen buzz about this. I don't see as much, but we're talking very different price brackets, right? That Seiko like MSRP'd under $600. And while this, for a luxury watch, is a very competitive price at $2,500, it's still a couple $1,000s. So not an impulse purchase for most individuals, at least not those that I hang out with. Koji asks, a really old flamingo. This is in regards to the gray flamingo dial that Underachieving Watch Collector had referenced. Possibly it would go gray. But technically, when we say go gray, really all it is follicles going white. And it just looks gray because against the dark hair, the white hair, you see that blend effect, but the hairs don't actually become gray. Not that anyone cares, except for me, because I like the color gray. And I want to go ahead and jump to the last version of my watches. But I do see Koji asked a question about what's the lume like on the Oris. And you know what? There were not any lume shots in the Worn and Wound article. So I'll do another quick search. Oris, what is it? 65. I've read more than one article on this one too. Divers Anniversary, and see if I can find another site that actually, like, I know a blog to watch. No, maybe they didn't cover it. Maybe it was Monochrome. Don't remember. I'm looking at the Hodinkee article right now, but they don't have any lume shots either. Now I'm just going to add the word lume to the search. I know this is super exciting. Let's see, Teddy Baldessar. His website. He's got some. Okay, there we go. Teddy's got one for us. Thank you, Teddy. I don't want to chat, Teddy. I'm live streaming. You know, they're always trying to get me to talk. It's exhausting. All right, so there you go. Here, let me get rid of my face. There you go. There's a picture of the loom. So, so it looks to me darker than the, not as bright as the pip in the bezel, notably less bright. Incidentally, they have I do love the longer one, but don't show it right now. But the crystal incident, sapphire crystal, but they do have it's very domed, so you can see, this is a good image. You can see the distortion from how they've domed it to, again, try and give you how it looked in that vintage plexiglass format. So I'll say the loom looks decent. I'm going to put it that way. Oris has definitely had some instances where they had some pretty poor loom. I had one, in fact, and it was loom that they dyed black for a visual aesthetic in the light, so that it glowed at all. I guess I should be grateful for that they actually used loom and not just paint. I guess was an interesting choice to me because it was so faint. But this seems brighter than that, but not like, this is not like Seiko Luma bright. At least that's not my impression. But of course, photos are very, very tricky because if you've ever tried to film, I don't know if you've ever done it with you, if you've done video or you've tried to take a photo of a watch. I'm going to use video as a better example because I do a lot of reviews of my watches where I will include loom footage. The problem is the cameras want to constantly adjust the ISO level. And when you're in that low light condition, they adjust it based off of the loom, and it always makes it look brighter than it really is. The photo may be more authentic to that, but neither here nor there. Orange Hand, welcome to the live stream, by the way, Orange. Oris has really fallen off from where they were 5 or 6 years ago. The Miss Piggy Pro Pilot is the nail in the coffin. I'm not sure Miss Piggy will be the death of them when they do. What are the two old guy Muppets, the Waldorf and Watson or whatever? Like when they get their duo set that's sold as a collection where you have to buy both at the same time, that might be the nail in the coffin. That's going to be my prediction. Miss Piggy was merely the logical extension of Kermie, right? Kermie needed his companion, and so that's what ended up happening. Koji says, the numerals look better with the loom, and the font reminds me of watching mid-90s ESPN shows. Brent says that Miss Piggy watch is bleh. I think I adequately quoted the emoji. Bruce says, always liked the Diver 65. Will consider. Well, they've got it, and it's $2,500. And I don't know how much the one from 10 years ago went. I saw somewhere a photo where they did a side-by-side between the two, and they looked reasonably similar. The more modern one is a safe bet's going to be better built, though. So anyway, here's a nice little close-up that Teddy had. I bet he sells Oris, so because I'm like, he's got some different photos than everyone else, so he's probably taken his own, which, of course, is much appreciated. Brent says, this is cool, but too small for me. Yeah, it is a 38 millimeter watch. So again, they want to have that vintage vibe. And they did make a modern accommodation in the sense of going ahead and doing it in 38 rather than 36. That is pretty small for a diver today. I think most things don't generally. What are the Black Bay 58s? Those are 39, right? That's usually about as small as things go. My Baltic Aquascaf is that same sizing. So for me, I'd be okay with a 30 millimeter, but my wrist is sub 7 inches. So, I can wear smaller watches pretty easily. And welcome to the live stream. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member, by the way. 38 or 40? I assume 40. No, you assumed wrong. It is 38. 38 millimeter is the size of the Oris Anniversary 65. Now, we want to talk smaller, but not that smaller. We got to jump to the last one. I figured this one would be the one to spend more time on. So I've been speed running through these other ones I wanted to discuss. And that has to be the new Omega Speedmaster Moonphases. Okay. They're in Meteorite. There are 2 of them. You can see them on the screen right now. Now, I want to make a few things clear. Omega fans probably already know this. Omega fans might, I don't know if they're going to like my take on this or not. Generally, no. I can be kind of hard on Omega. But all right, these are obviously not the first Speedmasters. They're also not the first Speedmasters with Meteorite. They're also not the first Speedmasters with Moonphases. But Omega got to Omega, and we got to keep adding SKUs to the Speedmaster line. So here we go, 2 new versions. But they are smaller than what we are used to with Speedmasters with this variety of complication. And that is an interesting thing to denote. Koji's saying, oh, I might have to apologize, Can. According to the Dink, it's a 40 millimeter case. What, this Oris? Well, the worn and wound, it said 38 millimeters. And what does Teddy say? Maybe Teddy measured it. Where's the summary? Guys, I don't want to be wrong. I want to correct myself. I don't mind being wrong, but I want to correct myself. All right, let's see. The newest, first, the case is still signed. Okay, I apologized. Can? No, you assume right. I was incorrect. The worn and round article I thought had said 38 millimeters, but Teddy says 40, 13 millimeters thick, and a 46 lug to lug. So, which it's 2 millimeters shorter than the old version. Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. All right. Well, anyway, thank you for checking on that because I was giving out bad info. So I want to double check to see what have I misread. Okay. All right. I see what I did. All right. No one really cares, but here's what I did wrong. The 40, they said the gripe was it came in the 40 millimeter case size, the Diver 65 reissue in 15. But since then, they've been doing 38 millimeter Diver 65. So it's the other regular Diver 65s that tend to be 38 millimeters, but this is 40. It was 40 the last time they did the reissue. However, historically, there was a 36. So, okay. So I see what I did. I did not read it closely enough. And this is where I want summary boxes instead of me trying to find things in the narrative. So Brent says 40 is a much better size. This might now make it wearable for you, Brent, since you had said earlier when I said 38, but I was wrong. So 40, and I like the lug-to-lug on it that Teddy reported. That anything, I have to be really careful if a lug-to-lug gets at after 50. Well, I guess I don't have to be careful. I know I can go up to 52. I think 53 was the largest lug-to-lug I had. It was the Tudor Black Bay Bronze, and I don't believe it overhang, but I don't know if I could go another 0.5 millimeter. So generally, I draw a line at 52 at this point. Like currently, my Moser Pioneer, those 43 millimeter ones, that's my largest lug-to-lug watch. And honestly, I should have probably gotten a smaller one, but they didn't have the color and in the size I wanted, so I got the color I wanted. And I wear it, but it's a chonker, and it takes up. I mean, that it's so close before the watch starts to wear you. But anyway, this watch, the Omega, jumping in. So thank you for the correction. Does not wear you. You will wear it if you can afford it. So there are a few things going on here. So, all right, Omega's had these like bigger movements for a while, like 44 and a quarter movement of watches. So now they've gone ahead and they've changed it up. So we've shrunken it. It's still the two counter subdial watches with the Moonphase at the 6 o'clock position. However, the sizing is quite a bit different. So the old version I had mentioned was 44, a little over 44 millimeters in diameter. The old regular version had been 50 millimeter lug to lug, almost 17 millimeters thick. And you know what I think about that. I get that they're chronographs, but that's absolutely appalling in my opinion. However, now we're down to, and they've got the sizing here, 43 millimeters is the diameter of the watch, which I think a lot of people like that diameter sizing, larger diameter sizing in general for chronographs. So 43 millimeters in diameter on a chronograph, I think is very appealing to a lot of people. 13.6 millimeters thick. So they shaved over 3 millimeters off the thickness of the watch. That is a huge step. And I do want to acknowledge it right now because I know Omega struggles mightily. Like they have watchmakers that can create the most incredible sort of chiming unit, like chiming chronographs, and they work in all sorts of materials and all that, but they've never learned how to make things thin. I don't know why. That's like the one skill that eludes them, but it's nice to see that they've actually done something. Now, let me say, I want to fully give them congratulations for taking a very serious step. They've made it manual wind is how they did it. And that's okay too, except I do want to point out, you can get the Zenith Chronomaster Sport, which is an automatic movement at 13.6. I think it's exactly 13.6. The same movement is in my Zenith Chronomaster original, a much smaller watch. And that watch ain't even 13 millimeters thick. However, I want the Chronomaster Sport's the one that looks kind of like a Daytona. I wanted to throw that out there because it's closer to the actual case size. And 48.6 millimeters lug to lug. So this is going to be very, very wearable, much more wearable than the other one. The other one was going to rule out, like, I would never have considered that the old, what was the sizing again? 44 millimeter diameter watch. I'd have thought I could wear it. And it's a dive watch. I could. The moment I would have seen 16.9 millimeters in thickness, I would have pieced out on that thing right away. So anyway, you've got two colorways here. Of course, this is my preferred one because it's gray, and we know what I think of gray. Here's another thing. I'm just going to denote it so people know all my biases. I don't like meteorite dials. I never have. I don't know if it's because they kind of feel busy or messy, or it's haphazard and it's like jazz, and who listens to that? So that was a jazz joke. I do apologize to jazz fans. So I like the color, though. I've always liked Omega's grays. Their grays and silvers are some of my favorite. I'm not big on the meteorite, though. So just acknowledging this isn't for me. But as usual, another thing I want to compliment Omega on, I do think they do color matching in some of the best ways possible in terms of how they integrate their watches. So I do think this shade in the meteorite with this dark kind of navy blue looks really good. It looks very as clean as meteorite can look. And the same goes with this black one. Again, black, a more traditional color. You've got red accents, all that. You've got your running seconds here at the 9 o'clock subdial, but you have the numbers here you might be able to notice are not times. This is actually a date window. So it uses red for the pointer to be a pointer date. Then you've got the chronograph hours over here on the 3 o'clock subdial. And then you have the moon phase going on in the 6 o'clock position. Now, that's the last thing I wanted to talk about is the moon phase complication. I guess in a way, I kind of get it. Moon phase, moon watch. I don't understand having a moon phase. There are a lot of things I don't understand, guys. I don't understand having a moon phase in a chronograph inherently. I know plenty of other brands do it, so I'm not going to call that out per se. I definitely don't understand having a moon phase in a manual wind watch. So you cannot put this on a winder, and I only ever owned one moon phase. I had a Glashütte Panomanic Lunar, and I didn't own it very long, but it was a nice watch, but it was an automatic. And so I had it on a winder so that I didn't have to set the moon phase all the time. Here, if you're rotating watches, you're either going to have to remember to keep this thing wound or you're going to have to set the moon phase. And normally setting the moon phase isn't the most fun thing in the world to set. Depends on the movement, of course. But this seems like a watch that wants to be automatic, but they wanted to make it smaller. And when they did, they realized you can't do a 43 millimeter watch and have it be 16.9 millimeters thick because everyone's going to think you've got a Valjoux in the thing. So they had to make it smaller. And the only thing they know how to do is throw the rotor away because they won't redesign the coaxial movement and they refuse to abandon the technology. So that's my theory. So I think that's a very, very weird decision, though the layout and configuration and all that looks pretty good. I will call out one more thing, and that is the moon phase configuration. So you see the N and the S. So they're advertising this as being a northern and southern hemisphere moon phase watch. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. This, all it does is remind me of the Snoopy moon, the whole Swatch moon watch moon phase with Snoopy. That's what it reminds me of. Because all northern and southern, you always get these two discs anyway. Like you get two moons on the disc. That's standard on a moon phase because of how it rotates around. So all they did was cut away half of the dial and then said, okay, well, the other one's going to represent the southern hemisphere. So, okay. It's not like you're getting cheated out of less. Like, I don't feel like you're cheated by this look. I think it looks cheap. I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it looks cheap. I don't like that the moon phase is displayed like that. I think the moon phase should be displayed like a horizon, and having two parts exposed just looks sillier. So I don't really like that, even though I do think that the moons look really nice. I think they used little chunks of meteorite with that, and that actually works pretty well. Overall, I think the aesthetic of the watch is solid, but very, very unappealing on a couple of fronts. So the third and final front that this is unappealing about, however, is this, the pricing. $17,000, 17,100 US dollars. This is a huge markup. The non-meteorite, I believe, Moonphase is about 50%. Like this is 50% more than that watch. And Omega marks up their meteorite watches, but not normally that much. Like the meteorite I read, I did not go back and confirm it myself, but the meteorite constellation watches from Omega command about a 30% higher MSRP than the other constellations that Omega sells, the non-meteorites. So why is this one a 50% premium? Meteorite's actually not that precious of a material to access. You can go online, you can find meteorite watches for sale with meteorite dials, not like the whole watch, but a dial made out of meteorite for under $1,000. So let's not pretend that this is something like they went into outer space and mined it. They didn't do that. Okay. It's not that hard to get. So the pricing is so unappealing. It's too bad because honestly, for a lot of people, I think this watch would check a lot of boxes. No, I'm not big into meteorite, but I know plenty of people who are. No, I'm not big into a northern, southern hemisphere configured Moonphase, but I mean, if you're going to do it, they pulled it off pretty well. And I think the moons look really cool. I really do like how they did the moons here. I think these colorways, especially the one I'm showing you with the gray, is a really attractive looking colorway. I like the pointer date. I like how they use the subdials. You know, I like how much smaller it is. Like this would be a chronograph that I would consider wearing, but I don't like that it's manual wind only. And I get why they had to do it, but nonetheless, with this sort of complication, I think it's inappropriate. Obviously, I'd roll it out just because of the meteorite, but I cannot get past $17,000 for a Speedmaster like this. It just does not make sense to me. So, and we just got done earlier talking about a Vacheron 222, which is very, very expensive watch. But given what they're doing, I understand the placement of where it's not weirdly positioned against their other watches. This is a weird markup for this style of watch with this level of complications. So what I will say is this will be cheaper than what you see listed. You will be able to get this gray. You will honestly probably be able to negotiate this after a few months at the dealers when they realize people are not spending $17,000 on non-precious metal Speedmasters. But it is a very popular watch model line, and I know Omega has to milk it. So, okay. It is what it is. All right, let me get caught up with the chat because a lot of you probably have opinions on this. And again, these were just my thoughts. You all can, of course, have completely different reactions to it. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Brent. I see a lot of comments from Brent so far. I think Brent has a lot of thoughts on this. Price is ridiculous. Full respect to, and I didn't mention like the meta certification. This is a super accurate movement. But again, we've come to expect that from Omega. You can get that accuracy at a much, much cheaper price. You can get the Moonphase from them at much, much cheaper price. And you can get Meteorite from them at a much, much cheaper price. I just don't understand why the sum of these parts are that much. I just don't get it. Brent says, I'm with you on that. I believe in reference to the pricing. Koji says, who listens to that? Look, lots of people probably like, I don't know. I just make up stuff. And Brent says, well, I kind of like the GMT Master 2 Meteorite, but not enough to spend all that money. A lot of people are going to love Meteorite. There's a reason why a lot of brands are doing it. A lot of people just find I think it's the texture. I think the texture appeals to some people in the dial format. It just doesn't work for me. I don't have like a design. Like I'm not a designer anyway. I don't have like an aesthetic argument. It's purely subjective. It's the same reason why I like gray dials more than I like blue dials. I can't, it's just a thing. It's just a preference of mine. Riskful Ignorance, welcome to the live stream, and thank you for being a club member. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd wear it as an automatic. Again, I want to say I don't understand why they got rid of it being an automatic, except I totally do, because it saved them so much. I mean, huge. Omega almost never seems to care at all about how thick their watches are. They had this master chronometer, what was the old one? What was the other one? Speedmaster chronoscope with the additional complications and stuff. Let's see. Master chronometer, Speedmaster Moonphase. So not the Meteorite ones. Here are the specs. So 50 millimeter lug to lug, 44.25 millimeter diameter, 16.9 thick. That's Longines level. And I make fun of Longines thickness when they add all the complications. But we understand it with Longines because they have to use modules for everything. So does Omega, because they won't redesign the coaxial. So they just add modules to stuff. Well, you've got all the complications in a movement here. They actually said, let's not keep that thickness. Let's go ahead and make it smaller. Let's take it down to 13.6, which is totally reasonable for a chronograph. Without these complications, the 13.6 is pretty reasonable for a chronograph. But to do it, all they did was chuck the rotor in the trash. The problem is that with the Moonphase, you want the rotor. I want the rotor. I don't know people who want perpetual calendars that are manual wind or Moonphases are manual wind or anything that's a pain in the ass to set. And Moonphases are. And so they should be automatic. I just think it should be a rule. And they broke the rule. But they needed to break the rule because who's going to buy this smaller watch if it was still 16.9 millimeters thick? Nobody would. It would be so ridiculously top heavy, especially when you imagine the side profile shot of it in proportion to the sizing of the watch. It would have looked stupid, just stupid. They had to do it. So, and it was totally the right move to make it a smaller version. So it makes me so not want the Moonphase, even if I like the way the Moonphase looks, and I kind of like the way it looks. I don't like the northern southern hemisphere thing, but hey, again, that's just a design choice. Ristful says, showing both moons doesn't appeal to me either. Again, it reminds me of what they did with the Moon Swatch, Moonphase versions. And when they did that with the Snoopy one, I figured that the whole reason they did was because you get to enjoy Snoopy twice as much. You get twice as much Snoopy. But, and again, for a cheap watch, fine. But for this, you know, I love like this texturing, the way they like their laser ablation stuff they do. These moons look really nice. I like this almost realistic kind of, you know, there's so many different types of moon faces. I've seen some that are just look like it's like a gold disc. Let's start with the Glashütte kind of look like a gold or a silver disc. Some that are you got like the smiling or the stoic you know, the more romantic ones where they're a face. The moon is a face. You've got some that are it's just like, let's lean into like looming them or something. But this with like the meteorite moons, these look really good. I really like the way this moon looks. And you still have both if you didn't have this whole southern hemisphere thing, but you could have this whole, you wouldn't have to have the 29th and a half. It would be a half crescent. They integrate, it can look really good. It really can. We know it because we see so many, like just look at anything from JLC with a moon face. Like they all look good. So I don't get it. I don't get it. But I mean, it was what I think they just wanted to show off both moons more, would be my guess. Benton, welcome to the live stream. It doesn't look good. I agree. Swim, welcome as well. I'm not a fan of chronograph complications or meteorite dials. However, I do like the color combination between the blue and the gray. I agree with you completely. The blue and the gray in particular is I think, a very attractive color scheme. Omega, to this day, has my favorite shade of gray. They're kind of this, and it's similar to this meteorite, this silver gray. I had a Seamaster that had this gray with a blue that integrated very, very well. They do it in the Aquaterra line. I think they might even have a DeVille in the color scheme without the meteorite. Very, very good color scheme. It's one of my most favorite things that they do. Very, very attractive. Ben says the Omega hype is strong. Well, I mean, there are a lot of reasons to love Omega. So I get it why a lot of people really, really like them. I mean, so comparably, their watches are a lot more achievable. And by achievable, I don't mean just cheaper because they've clearly been driving their prices up. But like, you can get so many. You can go in. There's no games. You can buy the watch from the store. You can get almost all the ones you might possibly want. You can go and buy. So you can have those. Their specs are really, really good. You can get like water resistance and all that stuff like for less than it would cost you from Rolex. They've got a lot of really strong history. A lot of their history is stronger than a brand like Rolex, quite frankly. So you've got all of that. Coaxial is an interesting thing. I know a lot of people, like I have nothing against coaxial, except to me, it's like the whole Moonwatch history thing. It's more of a buzzword. Like as a user, I see people, I've had people leave comments and that's fine about like saying that it's such a good movement. And I'm like, but why? Like all I understand is like the pallet system has less wear because of how it's designed, but it still requires more, like they recommend more servicing than Rolex does. So, and Oris for that matter, for their in-house movement. So to me, it's like, it doesn't seem to be saving me any time or maintenance or recommended servicing. So I don't get the attraction. And if the price that you paid was that every watch you have has to be fat, then I think you paid too much. Like Omega, I think your embrace of coaxial was not maybe the smartest move. But I know some people think that it was a brilliant move. But it seems to me like brands have gotten further with silicon balance wheels than going coaxial ever would have gotten them. So I don't know. I don't get it. Let's see. Brent says, Ben, I still like the original black best. Stona, welcome to the live stream. I really like the new Meteorite Speedies. It would be the black one for me, but both are great. Well, we'll throw the black one back up so that you can enjoy the one that you actually like. The Meteorite bothers me less on the black, but I do like the blue and silver so much better as a color combo. Because if I was wanting a Speedmaster and I wanted black, I would go like super traditional and get, I mean, maybe a sapphire. I might get a sapphire one. I'm not into the Speedmaster personally, but like the Hazelite or the black one. I do like the white one too. So, but if I was into black, I'd lean super traditional, but I am very boring. So we have to bear in mind that my watch tastes tend to run very, very conservative. So Riskful says, Swim, I'm the opposite. I like complications. I mean, well, the chronograph itself is a complication. I don't know on the layering of the complication. I'm cool with it. Let me put it that way. Like, I'm cool with this idea of, I thought this was really sad. I know this isn't new to this watch, but to do the running seconds and do a pointer date rather than a cutout date disc, I think that worked really well for this. And so you get to have your date along with the time, but it integrates super cleanly. I actually, as a general rule, prefer the dual registered Omegas over the tri-register of like the traditional Moonwatch format where we think of, the tri-register chronograph. I like tri-register chronographs, but Omega has a lot of like racing car inspired dual registers that I prefer to Moonwatches. Like, I think they look better. So there with this, and then just doing the what would be a third tri-register instead of being a Moonphase, I actually think that works. I don't think it works as a manual wind, and I think they made their Moonphase take up way too much space. But because just in terms of showing too much of the moon, but that's a minor quibble. Like, that would never stop me from buying the watch. This north-south thing, it wouldn't stop me. But it being manual wind only, and I love manual wind watches, but a manual wind Moonphase, absolutely not. I would never do it. Never. Okay, let's see. Brent says, I would have bought the latest model, but I can't stand the dainty taper of the new bracelet. Okay, interesting. I've seen a couple other people mention they don't like the aggressive taper that happens on those, and others, of course, that are like, they're just really glad that Omega is tape. Like, with my Speedmaster left in part because they didn't taper the bracelet at all, and the thing wore so heavy. I mean, the watch felt substantive. I missed that. It felt really substantive. But the thing with on bracelet, and I often wore it on silicone instead, but on bracelet, I get like hot spots. Like, the watch would actually at certain spots feel overly warm. Like my skin was warming it up too much because it couldn't, I don't know. It just occupied, it just touched a lot of skin. I don't know really how else to phrase it. It just didn't feel good. Maybe there's a better way to describe it. Joel says, I love a good Dennis rant about Omega. I think I've been pretty balanced on this one. There's a lot about this one. I like them getting it smaller, them going ahead and having some really good color balance, and the moons that they've used on this Moonphase. Like, there's several things here I really like about this watch. That I'm not a fan of Meteorite. I knew that going in. That they made it $17,000. Okay, that's in this economy. It's a bold move, Cotton, but we'll see if it pays off for them. There's nothing about Meteorite. This is an extreme markup for Meteorite, even for Omega. And there's a good argument to be made that there shouldn't be much of any markup for Meteorite. It's really not that special. But 50% above what they were doing before, that's a tough one for me. It's tough. They're not the only brand that does that, of course, but all right, let me see. Ben is saying, I'm wearing my JLC Reverso Duo Faced. What is on your wrist? Well, I said at the beginning of the video, but I'll pop it off briefly, but I am not wearing a Reverso because I got rid of my Reverso and I never had a Duo Face. If I got a new one, I would maybe get one of the Duo Faces because I thought they were so cool. I am actually wearing my Citizen Chrono, So I started to talk about the Zenith Chronomaster original, which I'm not wearing. This is Citizens, the Citizen, whole series of letters, AQ something. I think it's one of their. It's the one with, if I get it real close, I don't know. My webcam will let you see it, but it's got the platinum flakes and the washi paper dial. So it's a high accuracy quartz. This is actually a perpetual calendar watch. So you only see the date, but it actually just keep track of the leap years and everything. And it's titanium. I think they made 500 of these. But anyway, so I'm wearing my my one high accuracy quartz watch that I own. So that is, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact number of the system, but that is what is on my wrist today. Trap Vision, welcome to the live stream. You're not tardy. A wizard arrives exactly when he means to. So that is how it works. All right. Wristful Ignorance says a vintage Waltham 33 millimeter 12 jewel count gold tone from the 60s. Interesting. 12 jewel count. You do not hear much that anymore that's under 17. So that, but again, you did say it was from the 60s. I'm like, that's real vintage if you're getting that far back for jewels. Very, very interesting. And that's a very interesting brand, incidentally. Orange Hand. Omega makes more Speedmaster models than Baskin Robbins has ice cream flavors. They do have a lot of SKUs. To be fair, well, I don't know if it's fair or not. You guys can decide if it's fair or not. Let me put the watch back up. They make a lot of SKUs on like almost everything that they've got. Like they got a lot of Speedmaster SKUs in general. They got a lot of Seamaster SKUs. They got more Planet Ocean SKUs than they honestly should have. They got a lot of DeVilles. You might not realize it because like we never talk about DeVilles on YouTube, but they have a lot of DeVilles. Constellations, their integrated sports look with the claws and all that. Like, sorry, a little Toy Story throwback. They got all sorts of stuff going on. But yeah, their catalog is, I feel overwhelming. Like Rolex actually has more SKUs than I think of in my head, but it feels like everything is just like pretty compartmentalized by comparison. And they're, and a lot of it's just precious metal variants. So when you like go Explorer, you're like, okay, well, you say Explorer, Explorer 2. And then when we stick with steel, you only have a few colors, right? So it's really, really contained. That's never been Omega's strategy. They throw everything everywhere, and they leave a lot of stuff in production a really, really long time. So it's just a very different approach, but I don't know why they do it that way, but do it that way, they do indeed do. All right, let's see. All right. Can says, Arnold & Son's Moonphase models are epic. It's been a while since I've looked at them, but Arnold & Son in general has some really, really cool watches. And Ben Ted goes, Arnold & Son's makes epic watches. Thomas with the Escapement Show, welcome to the live stream. Just catching up with the rest of the stream. Dennis, you're right. The gold VC222 is the one to aim for. The flamingo-blue Tudor is an attempt by them to hype the brand. I like the Divers 65 reissue. Well, thank you for your summary takes on it. And indeed, those of you who have come in later, you can always go back and watch the recording if you want to see. We talk a little bit about the Steel 222, not a ton because I did a pre-recorded video earlier in the week about that. Talked about the Flamingo Tudor, which I threw in this morning because it's Tudor and everyone wants to talk about it. So we talked a little bit about that. And then the big anniversary on the Divers 65, which I inaccurately said was a 38 millimeter watch because I misread an article and it is indeed a 40 millimeter watch. And now everyone can wear it and everyone's happy and it's only $2,500. So it is way more affordable than what we are now talking about, the $17,100 Omega Speedmaster Moonphase Meteorites with the smaller 43 millimeter configurations. Big breath. All right. Watch Nicholas, welcome to the live stream, by the way. Glad you could make it. And thank you for being a club member. Hope things are going well for you. Brent is wearing Yachtmaster. Very interesting watch, the Yachtmaster. I've not considered buying one because I still would, because again, I'm boring. So I want just the boring steel, no date Rolex sub. So like really the only Rolex left in the list that I'm interested in. But the Yachtmaster is a very, very cool watch. And of course, that titanium one that they came out with was extremely interesting, but unfortunately, shockingly difficult to get for a non-precious metal, in my opinion. All right. Escapement says, when it comes to Speedmasters, I'm a fan of Moonphases, but it's El Primero for me all the way. I like Meteorite being used on dials, though. I love the El Primero, not so much for the history of it, but the fact that it's an automatic chronograph movement that's built like from the ground up to be that. So you don't suffer with all the modularity that I like. Design wise, I have no issue with modules. Modules are great. Like use modules, like be smart, be efficient. But the price starts to be the thickness. And when the thickness starts to go from reasonable thickness to stupid thickness, it's a problem. Here they've got the thickness very reasonable. 13.6 millimeters is what these new ones are in terms of thickness. I believe, in fact, I'll load it up. I think the Zenith Chronomaster Sport is 13.6 as well. But bear in mind that is an automatic, and that's what was given up by Omega in order to achieve this 13.6 on these new moon phases. But let me go ahead. I'm just jumping over to the Zenith site. So let me see if I can find one of their, you don't have to watch my painful Googling. All right. So here's one of the Chronomaster Sports. We don't need to sign up for anything. Where are the specifications? Where are they? Diameter, water resistance. No, I want thickness. Where the case? It would be case, right? What the? Where? Zenith, your website is dumb. This is not any help. All right. Let me go back. We gotta do another check, guys. Let's go to Joma Shop. Joma Shop, you're selling these. Here's the traditional one that everyone thinks of anyway. You're selling these. What's the thickness on this watch? Oh, I don't want a discount. I'm not going to buy. Oh, okay. 13.6 exactly. All right. So it's the same. It's the same as the Omega. So, and you get a 41 millimeter watch. So it is a little smaller, but less complications, obviously. So factor that in too. Like they didn't stick a moon phase in on this. Not the one I'm showing you at 13.6. It's just time, chronograph plus date. But it does exist as an option. Okay, enough of the finer things. Here's your picture of well, we'll put back up the black one because people like the black one too. All right. Continuing to get caught up with chat. Right. Let's see here. Brent says, a taper that aggressive on a 42 millimeter watch looks weird to me. Yeah, I've seen some profiles where people will hold the watch and show just how aggressive the taper can be. Since most people don't tend to look all the way around the wrist normal, like I think it looks weird in a wrist roll, like if you're doing a roll, but like in normal day-to-day life, I don't think most people would notice it. Riskful Ignorance says, definitely lost their minds with the price. And again, for those that are tuning in late, here are the prices in 3 different, so you can find your region that you're in. But here in America, $17,100, 18,800 euro, that's tax included, and 15,000 Swiss francs without tax. So, and the US price was without tax because tax varies by state here. So anyway, that is what is going on with that. Let's see. Matthew says, I got the first Omega in space from Teddy. They had only got the one in so far. I actually shipped it back to him a couple weeks ago so he could photograph it for a video. He couldn't get another from Omega. That's very cool. That actually was on my little list a few weeks ago of one of my favorite watches of 2024. I actually really like the look of the first Omega in space in a lot of ways. I prefer its design in almost every capacity over a Moonwatch. And I think it just starts with the alpha hands. I really like the aggressive alpha hands. I'm a big fan of delta hands out of Parmigiani, so that's not too surprising because both of those handsets, if you've ever looked at them side by side, they're just really sharp, angular. I just like it. I just like it. I just like how it looks. So anyway, it starts with that. Plus that deep blue color that they went with for the new first Omega. Very, very attractive. Reminds me of why people wear navy suits and not black suits. They actually, in brighter conditions, they go better than black does. You might be surprised at, but that's, I guess, I read that somewhere. I don't know anything about clothes, but that's what they had said. And so I thought, you know what, that's probably true for dials too. But people love a black dial because it's real easy to make everything stand out against it. Anyway, Watch Nicholas goes 222 trophy. 222 is great. True is a trophy. The Grail, is that a Grail symbol? The 222 in gold would be my Grail watch. Would at this present time, like it's the most expensive watch that I can think of that I would want. Maybe when I retire, I don't know. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So anyway, the steel one, not for me. I think it's very attractive, but it's not for me. But anyway, let's see. Underachieving Watch Collector says, ripping the rotor off to make it thinner is lazy. Yes, that is true. However, the alternative is you redesign the Omega coaxial so that you, instead of using the caliber 9908, you come up with a 10,008 and you built it in from the ground up to be a rotorless watch with all the complications. And then instead of $17,000, this watch becomes $28,000. So, I mean, they marked this up way more than they ever should have just because it was Meteorite. or because it was a smaller kit. I don't know what the logic was, but they marked it up more than it deserves to be, in my opinion. However, the markup would have been far worse if they had done a new movement. But at some point, I do feel that Omega needs to do a new movement. It's gotten to the point, and in fact, I got to give credit to Teddy Baldassar, because he mentioned that there is now, I don't know if that's always been there and I just didn't know. I've often asked you all, I've asked everyone, I've asked the world about is there a watch that Omega makes for men? So, and I'm just going to define that as mechanical and at least 36 millimeters in diameter, where the watch, crystal included, because it's how we actually wear watches, is under 10 millimeters in thickness. I had never been able to identify one. I didn't know of any single one out there that was at all like that. However, they do have one in the DeVille line now. And I found out when I saw a YouTube short from Teddy, and it was the least expensive DeVille that they make. And it was at a thickness of 9.9 millimeters. And I'm looking aside and scrolling because I'm trying to find it so I can show it to you, because it actually, I keep seeing Omega DeVilles that are over 10. I was familiar with those. They're like 10.8. 10.8 is pretty common for their for the Prestige line, for example, out of them. But they do have another one. I think it's a 41 millimeter watch too, that actually is a little bit thinner, but I don't remember for sure. So I'm trying to find that right now. But anyway, it's been a big gripe of mine. And the thing is, Omega used to do a lot of thin watches, but ever since they've adopted doing the coaxial technology, it's not been the case. And so can coaxial be thinner? Absolutely. These movements are all getting really long in the tooth at this point, but it is what it is, I guess, is the thing. So frustrating, but we just have to make do with it. So anyway, let me see. Ben says, what's the watch you want to acquire this year? For me, it is the JLC Master Control Mimivox. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to buy anything this year. That's what I keep saying, but I don't know. Vacheron Constantin 1921 36.5 millimeter remains an option that I've looked at a number of times. I still continue to look a lot at the Vacheron Malt, the ones with the gray dial and white gold, but I only ever see them overseas. I actually like the pricing. Honestly, if it wasn't overseas, I would probably have bought it. And I buy watches from overseas. I've bought watches from Japan. I've bought watches from Europe. My problem is that watch is on a gator strap. So I'm not going to get the strap if I buy it from Japan, which is where most of them are. And then I have to figure out getting the strap or doing an alternate strap. And I'm just like, why can't I have my strap? Can't someone in America sell this watch? So anyway, so that's why I haven't pulled the trigger on that. So those are probably the two. So Vacheron's the brand I've been looking at a lot in terms of a dress watch. Of course, I'm still on the list for the Rolex No Date sub. So if that comes up, I'll go ahead and get that when it comes up. The price only went up this year by $100, so it's $9,200 now. So that's fine. That's really about it. I don't know. I've started to look some more at the Cartier Santos. I had a Santos 100. It was way too big. Again, the Santos 100s were those early 2000s, like super. They curved the case. It's really comfortable, but it was way too much. But I've looked at like Santos Dumonts, especially in precious metal, because again, I lean more dress watch wise. The only non-dress watch I'm seriously considering is that Rolex. So, but I don't know. I'm all over the place, guys. I have no consistency anymore. So I'm in a holding pattern for the time being. Trapfisher says, I imagine the new Speedmaster would indirectly help sales of the Lunar Pilot with Meteorite. I think you're right. I think people will start to look at what you'll see this and they'll see the price, or they'll see some aspect of it like the manual wind that will put them off. And they'll go, well, wait a minute. If I want to get something else, like if you want to get Meteorite, like Omega's got a whole bunch of other stuff that's well under $17,000 too. So if Meteorite's what you like, and you like how Omega does Meteorite, I agree. I think there's a lot of stuff there that you're going to be able to go ahead and see, and you're going to say, wow, this is actually really, really compelling sorts of materials and stuff. So yes, I I think that's definitely the case that we could potentially see Omega move some others, and maybe that's part of the strategy. I don't know, but I there's so much there that's good, and there's so much that I still feel that they just kind of went a little too far on in terms of what they were hoping to achieve. But anyway, neither here nor there, I suppose. But it is what it is, as I sometimes like to say. All right. I think that's okay. Sorry. I've been bouncing around still. I did find one. So here you go. Here's an example. So I searched for Omega DeVille's from Omega's website with mechanical movements. Cheapest one is this 39.5. So not the 41, it's 39.5 DeVille Prestige, steel on a leather strap, 9.8. So they do actually have one. They have watches under 10 millimeters. So I have to acknowledge that, because I've criticized Omega not having watches under 10 millimeters anymore, unless you go quartz. So now this one's not available, but Teddy linked one that is. So they do have some. I think it was a 9.9 that might still be in the catalog, but they can do it. The movements are thin enough, but they choose not to. So anyway. All right, I think I will call it. This ended up going a little bit longer than I expected, but we had quite a discussion about the Omegas, so that's understandable. Thank you, everyone who tuned in live. If you watched the recording, feel free to leave a comment on any of the watches I discussed today and leave your thoughts. I do like to read those. I do go back and read them. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It does help the channel out. I'm going to go ahead and end it. I'll be back next Saturday. Will I have pre-recorded videos in between? Maybe. I haven't decided yet. We're going to start, as we start getting closer and closer to Watches and Wonders. We're still a ways away, but as we move closer, we will, here at the start of the year, start seeing all these new things that watch brands come out with. I expect we will see a lot more interesting things out of Omega, much closer to Watches and Wonders. They usually start dropping the big, cool stuff 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. We're too early for that right now. So now they're playing around. We're going to watch them cook here, though, in a couple months. So anyway, that is it. Thank you again, everybody. I will talk to you all on the next one. Take care.